Now, actually, we've heard an awful lot over the last couple of weeks of the closure of retail outlets, particularly in Dublin. I mean, an estimated 400 retail outlets in Ireland are to close by the end of the month or over the next couple of months, and we're hearing over and over again the difficulties those in business are experiencing as a result of the economic downturn. But one of the big issues also is the fact that many of the retail outlets are actually tied up in these long-term leases, and the rates for those leases are incredibly high, and it's strangling an awful lot of these businesses. Anyway, I've with me now two people who know all too well the challenges of actually trying to keep a business going. May Frisbee runs the restaurant we're in now, which is Pasta Fresca here in Central Dublin, and John Corcoran is the manager and CEO of a number of shoe shops around Dublin as well. You're both very welcome. I suppose, John, first of all, tell me again the problems you're experiencing right now trying to keep your businesses up and running.
Well, Karen, the economy has had a major rupture over the last 2 to 3 years, with a very substantial fall in business and turnovers. And for many people at this stage, turnovers would probably be down to 50% of what they were 3 or 4 years ago at the peak. So that's on that side, the turnovers have fallen or collapsed virtually.
Yes.
Now, on the cost side, we have a lease law in Ireland which does not allow your rent to fall. They're very long leases, in my case 35-year leases, with upwards only rent reviews. The rent can never fall. You can only break your lease at the end of 35 years. So
how long have you been in this lease?
15, 16 years.
This is for one of your outlets now in Grafton Street.
Grafton Street, that's right.
So, okay, it was before really the boom times, but at the time it seemed like it was an acceptable enough lease for you to sign at the time, did it?
It did 15 years ago, but when the rents went up 5 or 6 years ago, I knew they were far too expensive. Even with the boom, the rents were crazy.
So when you signed it originally, John, you signed it for 35 years.
Yeah.
But
I signed it for 25. It was a 35-year lease.
Yeah, okay.
But 10 years had expired on it. So the residue was 25. And I signed it at that stage.
But the agreement was that the landlords could raise the rent every so often.
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years. And was there any agreement at the beginning as to what percentage were they going to raise the rent?
No, when I went in originally, it was 140,000 euros. But within 10 years, it went to 445,000.
445,000.
It went up 300%.
That's nearly $500,000.
$500,000.
To rent the premises?
Yeah, of 900 square feet. Half the size of this room.
Of 900 square feet?
Yeah, per year, every year.
So how much do you actually have to make to even break even to pay that rent in the first place? Just to cover your rent?
To break even, we'd have to turn over 2 million or above 2 million. But we turn over about 1 million.
It's extraordinary. Yeah. And so you went, when the crash started to happen, presumably you went back to your landlords.
Correct.
And what happened?
Well, when at the rent review, I spoke to the landlord and I told him, look, this rent is, absolutely enormous. We try and trade through it. Now, if we try and sell the lease, I said to them, what would our position be with you? Well, I said, well, come and see us at that stage. So I took that as implying that they might be reasonable to us if we couldn't sell the lease. Now, that's what happened. We tried to sell the lease, but of course no one wants the lease.
Yes.
Because the rents are
of course
a multiple of what they should be. So then we wrote to the landlord, sent in accounts showing the losses, looked for a reduction, and we thought he was giving us a reduction, but then he welched on it.
So they refused to reduce the rents,
refused,
even though they know it's going to cripple your business.
Absolutely.
Or could cripple your business.
Yeah.
But where's the logic in that, John, from their point of view? I mean, if you go out of business as a result of their refusal to renegotiate the high leases, nobody's going to take over that lease, as you say. So they're left with an empty building.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, their attitude is that they have a contract with you, which they wouldn't get in any other European country or any third world country. The lease law in this country is not allowed in any European country or in any third world country. But unfortunately, we're stuck with those leases, all the traders in Ireland. The institutions are holding the line. They don't want to be seen to be giving concessions. and they will bust you, as they did with Ivan Yates and all the other people.
But
3G,
why? But I don't.
Veramoda,
Why would
Hughes
they
and
do?
Hughes,
Because then.
4-star pizza.
Yeah.
You know, the list is endless.
But I don't understand their logic, though, because if all of these businesses are going to collapse,
Yeah.
nobody's going to take over the lease.
No, somebody will take
So-
over the lease, but the rent will then be a
It'll
fraction.
be reduced down.
A fraction. But they'll just bleed you dry until there's nothing left, and they move on to the next one.
Now, there has been, though, a change. There's been agreement now that you can't that leases in this country will no longer
In the
be
future.
only rent
In the
upwards.
future.
Yeah, but it doesn't affect
Current.
those ones
Yeah.
that have are
Which is
already in
95%
Langus.
of people are in the old leases.
So you're taking these landlords, you're challenging this
Correct.
through the courts.
Yeah, but they sued us because we stopped paying
Yes.
them. And we've countersued them and asked the court to strike down these leases, that they're against the public interest and against the principles of social justice, that people have been forced to pay a multiple, not at 10%, 200%, 300% more than they should be paying. And it's destroying people's livelihoods and the jobs.
You're not paying rent right now.
Where we've stopped paying rent.
How long have you stopped paying rent for?
About 9 months to a year.
So you're a brave man because you're taking on a very powerful landlord.
Very powerful, absolutely. Huge landlord.
Have you been given court dates, John?
We've had an adjournment recently, 2 weeks ago. It was adjourned, and it'll roll on a bit. It's in the process. There's been a couple of adjournments and that, so we haven't got a fixed date yet.
But you're still in the premises.
Absolutely, we're still occupying the premises.
They haven't tried to eject you from the
No,
premises?
not yet.
If you lose the case, John, what happens?
If we lose the case, the game is probably up for us at that stage.
And you've been in business for how long?
32 years.
Is this the worst time ever you've been in business in this country? Because I know you were running shoe shops back in the 80s when things wouldn't have been good.
Late 70s. This is a horror story that's happened to the country in the last 4 years. It's an absolute horror story. I've never experienced anything like it. It's a massive, the economy has collapsed virtually. There's been a massive oversupply of shops and shopping centres, and the demand has just evaporated. And we're bunched, really, for many people, unfortunately.
We're bunched as a country?
Unfortunately, we're bankrupt. Karen, you know that. Let's reopen on the civilians.
Is there any hope, John? We've a
Well,
new
there's always
government going
hope.
to come
Of
in.
course, yes, of course.
So what would be the main thing from your point of view that this government needs to do to help businesses like yours and May's?
Action.
What
Because
kind of action?
all we've had in the last 3 years is paralysis. Nothing happened. The government concentrated entirely on the banking problem and ignored the real economy. You want decisions immediately, like, first of all, ban upwards-only rent reviews instantly. People break clauses in all leases. People allowed to renegotiate their rent to the real rent, the market rent, not nonsense rents that are now.
Could that actually happen, though?
Of course it could. Like,
you're saying that it would be possible to introduce
Definitely.
a piece of legislation,
definitely, no problem.
and you wouldn't have these massive landlords, these very powerful landlords, saying that's completely,
because there's
illegal.
a national emergency here, Karen. This is not normal times. So the government has already thrown out loads of contracts because of our financial difficulties. They thrown out the contracts with the pharmacists, and it was upheld in the courts, where the judge said there was an exceptional threat to the economic well-being of the state and its people, and he allowed the government to tear up the contracts. They've torn up their contracts with their own employees, the state employees. They've all had to take wage reductions. They drove a horse and carriage through the whole property law with NAMA and all that. So the government can do this in 10 seconds flat, if there's a will to do it.
Do you have hope that the new government
Definitely.
will have the ability?
I do.
Well,
yeah.
because a lot of people are saying, actually, do you know what, they might be even worse than the lot that are going to be
nothing
thrown
could
out.
be worse than what's gone before. We all know that. The economy and the entire country was totally mismanaged. There was nobody in control. The politicians were busy opening pubs and going to funerals, and the country was left go down the toilet. Nobody was on the show. The people we trusted in, the civil service and all that, were clueless. They hadn't got to acquired academic skills or knowledge, and unfortunately the whole thing imploded.